Thank you. Yeah, that was the time Dora was supposed to come. It was more than 2
So it wasn't like this last one where people go down and on shelter 5 times a day.
Okay, we're on Zoom, we're online, ready to go.
Yeah, I'm in September, you don't go in July, August.
We're up to chapter 30. Remember last few chapters, Alter Rebbe was addressing the question of, he made a very strong, first, obviously, the beginning of Tanya, the Alter Rebbe told us about the makeup of the soul, the structure of the soul, and the different attributes of the soul, the emotional attributes, the intellectual attributes, etc. Exactly how the neshama works, and that there are 2 nefashot, there are 2 souls, the godly soul and the animal soul, and they reflect each other. And around chapter 25 or 26, he may finalize the point that at any time, anyone who wants to serve God is able to, and it's like Moses says in the Torah, it is very near to you to just do it. And you can even do it with feeling, even if not some incredibly strong, passionate, conjured, intentional love, but it can be, you can at least depend on, you can fall back on the natural love that we all have for God as an inheritance from our forefathers. And part of what makes it easy and available to all of us is that the fact is the nature of the neshama is that the godly soul is stronger than the animal soul. So whenever there's a match between the two, the godly soul always has an advantage. Talk about different advantages. For example, the fact that God helps the godly soul, God gives it the nature to that the mind always rules over the heart. If only we will allow, if only we will practice that. So the battle between the godly soul and the animal soul can always be won by the godly soul.
So how come it's not always won? Because if
and then chapter 26, he says, what about when it doesn't happen? Exactly. Chapter 26, 27, 28, he says, what about when there's something that interferes with the normal system? The normal system is that the godly soul is stronger. But what happens when there's something other than the regular system that gets in the way? For example, if you're feeling sluggish, if you're feeling lazy, which comes from sadness, which is one of the classic tactics of the animal instinct, is when the animal instinct feels that the godly instinct is starting to gain ground, the animal instinct will desperately look for ways to get me back to pleasure seeking. How do I get back to focusing on me? And the most classic, the common way that the animal instinct can do that is to make me feel sad. As long as I feel sad, I am far more likely to go searching for pleasures than if I were joyful. And so what do you do about the sadness? Talks about where the sadness came from. If it's sadness from matters of spiritual matters, spiritual shortcomings, or if it's sadness because of troubles in your physical life, your human life, talk about all the different possibilities, right? And how to get rid of it. Shout yourself down. No, that wasn't part of the sadness. That was after that. No, that was part of the solution for the next problem. The sadness, first he said, first of all, embrace if it's physical.
Schedule the sadness for a specific time.
Right. You said if it's physical suffering, then you remind yourself that goodness comes in many different versions. The best kind of goodness is the kind that only God understands. If it's the kind of goodness that we can understand, then it's not the greatest kind, because how great can we understand? That was one. Then he said, what about if it's sadness over spiritual shortcomings? I'm not as good a person as I should be. I'm not as good a servant of God as I should be. So then he says it depends when it shows up, if it's intentional or if it's kind of, if it's, just thoughts that come to you on their own without you intending to be thinking about it. It differentiates between whether it's happening during time of Torah study or prayer versus during your regular daily life, your regular mundane life. In any case, he gave all the different suggestions of what to do about sadness. We can go review those chapters. Then he says, there's another possibility, which is that not only can sadness interfere with the natural system of the godly soul being stronger than the animal soul, but there's also a problem known as timtum halev, which is when the heart is blocked, when there's so much unholiness in your space, in your emotional and spiritual, mental space, that the unholiness is blocking out the godliness, and your heart, your emotions, the emotions of the soul have become solidified and like calcified, almost congealed into a very stuck single position, and you can't shake yourself out of it. You can't. The warmth and the light of the soul are not reaching you. You don't feel it. What do you do then? Chapter 29, he says, you beat it out of it. Like he said, the example of a piece of wood that won't kindle. You're trying to light a piece of wood on fire, and it won't light because it's too dense. You break it into little pieces. The same thing is with the soul. You break the soul into little pieces. You have to have if the heart is congealed, you break the heart. What does it mean to break your own heart? It means to tell yourself that you're in a very lowly spiritual place. Get yourself really upset over your lowly spiritual status and how distant you are from God, and how you're denying yourself the obvious truth that God is actually everything, and God is deserving of your service more than you are, et cetera, et cetera. And if you can break yourself out of that stuckness, if you can break the unholiness, that breaks the heart, so to speak, just like breaking the wood into little pieces. And then the heart lets go of its stuck shape, and you can reform it into whatever shape you want it to be, so you can retrain yourself to feel the light of the soul. So that's another problem with a solution, the timtum halev, and the solution to it. Now there's another way to deal with timtum halev, and that's where he starts with on chapter 30. Chapter 30 is a very heavy chapter. Heavy, not so much it's not like esoteric, but it's heavy in how real and practical it is. And anyone who reads this honestly is going to feel a little bit of a guilt trip, but it's true. So you take it as it applies to you. Each of us will take it as it applies to us, but it's a very useful and actionable chapter. Chapter 30, Perek Lamed. Another thing you should take to heart, to fulfill that which the sages say, you should be a low spirit, you should be humble before every person. Which means consider everybody else better than yourself, which he will obviously explain as we go through the chapter. And he says, veheve, the sages say, veheve, you should be. Doesn't say consider yourself or imagine yourself. It says, heve, you should actually be, be'emes la'amitai, truly. In truth, you should recognize that you are humbled by everybody around you. Bifnei kol ha'odam mamash, before every other person, literally. Afilu bifnei kal shebekalim, even before the lowliest of the low. What is the lowliest of the low? Very simple way of simple visualization. Imagine all of the lowest kind of people hanging out together, all the riffraff of the world, and then there's one guy who all of them say, "Oh, that guy's low." That's what we're talking about, okay? Like the comedian who said,
The juice of the trash bag.
yuck.
These are the ones.
Oh, the trash bag.
V'hainu al pi maimed hazal,
Actually,
like the sages say,
כאילו, stay, you know, מיץ של הזרע.
al todin es chavercha ad shetagia lemekoimoy. Don't judge your friend until you've come to their place. Don't judge a man until you walk the mile in his moccasins. If you can't judge another person until you've been in their place, then you can never hold their spiritual status against them, right? Because it's their place, it's this individual's place in life or in the world that causes them to sin. By the way, the world of psychology has relatively recently come up with this brand new, brilliant idea called trauma-informed methods. Familiar with it? Trauma-informed therapy, trauma-informed methods, trauma-informed approach. It's all about how when you're dealing with somebody who is acting out, who's got problems, you assume that it's because of some trauma that they've experienced. That's the beginning, the starting point.
It's bogus.
Okay, let's
It's
say
It's
it. What do we do with
It's
it?
something.
It's assumptive, but this chapter is going to be the intelligent version of that,
Thank you.
or the complete version of that.
Yeah, thank you.
It's a good system, but it's not good enough. This is the truth. Here's the truth about that idea. It's not just trauma informed, it's challenge informed.
Yeah.
Be aware that their challenge is not like your challenge. Now, it's possible that that challenge is what it is because of trauma, or it could be that their challenge is what it is because of just the nature with which they were created. Regardless, that's what we're talking about here. So, it's the place, it's this individual's place that causes him or her to sin. In order to make a living, this fella has to be out in the marketplace all day. And he has to sit on the corners and sell his wares. And if you're sitting on the street corner all day, every day, your eyes are going to see all of the wonderful things that the physical world has to offer. Then your eyes see, and then your heart desires. That's just the nature of things. So the more exposed you are to all of the unruly pleasures of the world, the more you're going to want them. The yitzroi boyer, ketaner boyer ameufa, and his animal instinct, his evil inclination, burns inside of him like a flaming furnace. Like it says in Hosea, whereas somebody who rarely goes out into the marketplace. And most of the day he's sitting in his office, in his house, or in the study hall. Or even maybe it's a guy who does spend a lot of time in the marketplace, but it's possible he doesn't have such a hot-headed nature, not such a passionate nature. Because not all inclinations, not all animal souls are equal. As explained elsewhere, some people's evil inclination wants more pleasure, some people's evil inclination wants less pleasure. So you have two ways of letting the person you're looking at, the Kal Shebekalim, off the hook. First of all, chances are that it's his life situation that's causing this kind of behavior. And second of all, maybe it's simply that this person by nature has a very strong urge for whatever. So you can't judge. That's rule number one. You can't judge. You can't judge another person until you've been in their place, whether it's their place literally, physically. No, you're not sitting out in the public spaces like he is, or if it's a spiritual place where you don't have the same temptation, you don't have the same soul makeup as this other guy. The truth is, somebody who is very passionate and very heated in their nature, Uparnasosa hilias miyoshvei krones kol hayoim, and in order to make a living, his career takes him to the public space all day. Ein lo shum hisnatzlus al chatov. That doesn't give him any excuse for the sins that he's committing. Doesn't let him off the hook. Umikre rosha gomer, and he's still considered a sinner. Al asher ein pachad Elokim lenegeden, of the fact that he doesn't have the fear of God before his eyes. Ki hoya lo lisapik, because he should find a way to control himself. And control the desires in his heart, because of the fear of God, who sees all of his actions.
But we just say we should not judge the person, and now we're judging this man.
Not judging him.
But we
He's
say
saying-
he's supposed to.
We're saying you can't judge him, and the fact that you can't judge him doesn't mean he's innocent.
So what's my perspective? If I shouldn't judge him, can I judge the situation? So let's say I'm hanging around with
You can judge the
somebody-
behavior.
Okay, yeah.
You can say what you just did is horrible. That doesn't make you a horrible person.
I don't need to tell them, I'm not gonna change them, but let's say I was hanging around with somebody and a lot of what I saw in that behavior bothered me because I know where it comes from, but we've been there already,
How do you know where it comes from?
because I recognize it. You share genes.
So you see the
And then-
pattern. You don't know where it comes from. You recognize a pattern,
Yeah, okay,
but you don't know where it comes from.
Yeah,
That's what the
of
Alter Rebbe is saying. You don't know where it's coming from.
right. But then what is my, like, if I say, okay, I don't judge it, I don't know what it is, then I never call it bad.
No, the behavior you judge, the person you don't.
You say that you're acting bad, you're not saying that you're bad.
What you did was bad.
The other guys talk about the sin and not the sin.
Exactly.
So in the therapy that I follow, and I don't, think the rule or the law, is it's a dialectic. The person is the person who's in one soul, but their behavior might not be so.
Right.
So there's that dialectic,
Yeah.
so you have to bring it together. See the-
Right.
Maybe together.
Now, the Alter Rebbe is adding another possibility, which is maybe their soul is dark.
Mhm.
And that's the way they were made, to struggle with a darkness in them that needs to be struggled with. But the fact that they have all of the conditions that make it almost impossible for them to succeed doesn't mean it's actually impossible for them to succeed. They should nevertheless succeed. How could you succeed? By simply recognizing that God is watching what I'm doing and he doesn't like my behavior. Stop it. Like that skit on what's his name? Bob what's his name? Newhart. Bob Newhart. Stop it. His therapy, he's playing the therapist. If you don't know it, look it up. Very funny. So
Either 3 minute or 5 minute there.
So he should control himself because he knows that God is watching, and he should have a basic fear of God. Commissioners Barley, as was explained, like we mentioned before, the mind does control the heart if you just act on it. So the first thing is you can't judge them, even though that doesn't in any way let them off the hook, which is kind of like a good way of turning it around on yourself. You could say, well, I have the same problem. I also had a difficult childhood, so I guess I could also misbehave and get away with it. The answer is no. Nobody gets away with misbehaving. You're supposed to control yourself. Only the people around you can't judge you. So I can't judge the other person, which means I can't feel haughty and arrogant because I'm better than them. That's step number one. Now, b'hine be'emes, the truth is, although we're not letting this fellow off the hook, you can't let them off the hook because they should control themselves. Nevertheless, the reality is that it's an incredibly difficult battle. It's a major battle. break the strength of the flaming, the burning passions of the animal soul. Which burns like a raging flame. Through the with the fear of God, mamash. It's a major test for the fear of God to be the final say, even despite the passions of your animal soul. The hilkach, and therefore tzarach kol adam lefi mashu mekomim madrugase b'avodas Hashem. Therefore, every single person, every individual at their own level in their service of God, lishkol v'livchen ba'atzmai, to take stock and to weigh out carefully and to understand well imo eved Hashem, whether you're actually serving God. At this level of intense, serious, intense battle. And this kind of test. Think about this guy, this Kal Shabakalim, Mr. Kal Shabakalim. He's the lowest of the low, which means he is constantly surrounded by all kinds of temptation, and he's got the worst possible set of soul attributes, and he's got all the passions and all the desire. This guy has like all the cards are stacked against him. Don't think about his behavior. Think about his struggle. Think about the challenge that he has. Now ask yourself, are you putting up that kind of fight in your own life? Whether it's in doing mitzvahs properly, going, for example, when you stand to pray, how strong, how difficult, how much do you struggle to focus on the prayer, to pour out your soul before God, the chol koichei mamash, with all of your strength, literally, ad mitzvah nefesh, to the point where your soul can expire, and to battle, to fight off the body and the animal soul that's within it, which distract you from proper kavanah, from proper focus during prayer. B'milchama atzuma, in this intense battle, ulevatsham, and to beat them down, ulekattam ka'ofor, and to wear them down like dust. Koydem hatfila shachas ravas, before you start your davening, morning and night, midayim b'yoyim, every single day. How well are you doing in that task? When you first of all, how often are you praying? Second of all, when you pray, how often do you pray with proper intent? And when you do pray with proper intent, how strong are you fighting off the distractions of human life? Guilty as charged. Begam, b'shas atfilin, even during the prayer, not just in preparation for the prayer, but during the prayer, liageya atzmai b'yigias nefesh, to put the effort into the prayer, like soul effort, v'yigias basar, and physical effort, as will be explained later at greater length in chapter 42. In other words, it's true that this guy is failing in his struggle, but how are you doing in your struggle? You're saying, well, I'm not shoplifting and whatever, eating, Yeah, those are his temptations. What are your temptations? Your temptations are to think about how your stock portfolio is going in the middle of your Amida prayer. How well are you doing with your challenge? How often do you think about a client that you forgot to call back when you're in the middle of the Shema, So you don't have the same struggles. So we're not talking about the quality of the sin or the quality of the transgression or the quality of the mistake. We're talking about the quantity or the intensity of the effort. You know your level, you know where you're at. How well are you doing with your struggle before you start judging that guy with his failing, his struggle? Anyone who doesn't reach this level of prayer that he just described, to have this incredibly intense battle with the evil, with the animal instinct, עדיין לא הגיע לבחינת וערך מחמס היצר הבוער כאש להבה. You haven't reached this level of fighting with the animal soul with like a flaming furnace. Lias nishbar nichna v'nishbar, to subdue and to break the animal soul because of the fear of God that you have. There was a town in Eastern Europe called Kremenchug. Kremenchug. There was a yeshiva in Kremenchug, and a Chabad yeshiva, and the mashpia at the Chabad yeshiva, mashpia is like the dean of Hasidic studies, who was also the life coach, so to speak, the spiritual life coach to the students, who's always giving them lessons on how to become better and how to improve their character, etc., etc. So this mashpia, one Shabbos, he was talking about a particular fellow in town, a Jewish fellow, who had lost the battle with his evil inclination at that time, and he had a shoe store. He was a cobbler, shoe store. He was a shoemaker, and he had his business open on Shabbos. And this mashpia tells the students, every time I walk by his place on Shabbos, it's like a stab in the heart. So the students said to him, "Well, come on, don't overreact. He's an outcast. And the mashpia got really upset at them, and he said, "You think that I take it personally? It's a stab in the heart that he isn't keeping Shabbos properly? That's not what's bothering me. Of course, I know where he's at. I know where he's coming from. It's difficult. He has to support his family. He doesn't think he can do it without it, and he's afraid of the situation in the world, and he's influenced by peer pressure and by society and all the excuses he comes. Of course, I know all that. And he didn't study in the yeshiva. He doesn't know all of the depth of Hasidic teaching that teaches us what Shabbos is. He doesn't know all that. So of course, I'm not devastated by what he's doing. What I'm devastated by is that when I see him violating Shabbos, it reminds me of my own failings, because I did study in the yeshivas all my life, and I do know the depth of, and I know the value of every single moment of Shabbos. And can I honestly say that I use every moment of Shabbos to its fullest spiritual potential? Me knowing what the value is of every minute of Shabbos? And he starts crying. He's crying again. No, I'm failing. I'm failing worse than he is. That's what he's talking about here. He's saying, sure, that guy's failing in a very, on its face, a very horrible way. But that doesn't speak at all to the struggle that he's putting up. How much is he fighting for? Compare that to how much you're struggling to do the right thing versus how easily doing the right thing comes to you. Maybe to you, the right thing comes easy. So you think you're a better person because you're doing the right thing, which comes easy to you, than that guy who's doing the wrong thing, even though he fights really hard to try to stop? You're not better than him.
I'm better in this part. I'm better in this part of life.
No, you're not better. You're doing better things, but you don't get credit for it. You were raised this way. This is your nature. Your friends are all doing the same thing. Nobody's pulling you away from it. There's no distraction. There's no temptation, whatever. We all know the reality of how difficult it is for us to do the good that we're doing, or how easy it is.
But sometimes I get the point of why not judging the people. Sometimes we are in the same situation. We walk maybe not the same shoes. I can say my shoes are less comfortable. I know what that's
right. So that's why he said, and even Alter Rebbe already addressed that. He said, even if you are also the kind of person that spends all day in the market, but maybe his animal soul is a much more passionate animal soul than your animal soul. You don't know. You don't know how much the distractions influence the other person compared to how much the distractions influence you.
So it's basically telling us no expectation of other people.
No judgment of other people.
That makes everybody. No expectation. If
no.
You,
expect everybody to fight and do well. And when they fail, don't judge them.
So when it's between them and God, I can get it. But let's say we're in the same boat now, and it's maybe not over religious, but let's say I was hiking with someone or walking the same trail. This person couldn't stop complaining, but we walking in the same, like, I feel what you feel. I feel even worse. My knee, not this way. But then
I think Albert Einstein, I think it was Albert Einstein that had this analogy about all the animals taking
yeah,
a test to see if everybody's capable of, and the test is to climb to the top of the tree and come back down. And the
Yeah.
goldfish is saying, how am I supposed to pass this test? No. You don't know what their abilities are. You don't know. I mean, maybe you enjoy the outdoors more. They don't. Maybe
but
there
then
happen
if
to
I'm
be.
bothered by them complaining.
Maybe they happen to
I
be-
complain.
Go ahead, complain. What are you going to get from it?
Nothing. But like,
Try it. It
just
might
I
help.
feel better with myself. No,
No, the point is,
because that's what comes out.
right? You can
eventually.
never know what's behind their difficulty.
So
I mean,
it's
to
like
use the
physically
analogy-
we're in the same situation. We might.
You're never in the same situation.
The famous story about the Bible. I'm not gonna go everything, but that's the
But
idea.
that's a whole different
You-
story.
Right, but
But-
you can be in the exact same idea, in this exact same situation, but you get it in a completely different way from the other
We're
person.
talking about mindset.
Even in mindset, you mind work in one way and his mind works on a different way.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So yeah,
Both of us see the same picture, but
Well,
with a
someone on
different
the-
perspective.
Judgment? And is there, because it seems like an omnibus word, like, don't judge, but you have to discern or somehow. you
Yeah.
know.
you don't judge the person. It says al todenes chavercha. Don't judge the person. It doesn't say don't judge the behavior.
עד שתגיע למקומו.
Huh?
עד שתגיע למקומו.
Right.
Yeah, but
So
But
you
the-
can
so you
never
get a
know.
chance- you have a
No,
chance to
the
get
Alter
the
Rebbe
point.
says,
not because you don't know that you're there.
right. That's why the Alter Rebbe says here that until you've come to their place includes their physical space and also their spiritual status. And you'll never know.
Or might you say you withhold judgment? Or you do not judge?
You have no business judging them, is what he's saying.
Okay.
That's the Mishnah. That's not the Alter Rebbe. The Mishnah says, 2,000 years ago, the sages said, you got no business judging people until you know for sure you're in the exact same place, which is never going to happen because you have no way of knowing that. So don't judge. Yeah. So that was one example. The example of,
Why do we have a tendency to judge?
Oh,
because it makes us feel so much better about ourselves.
right?
I think it's survival, partially Darwinian survival.
Yeah, it could be.
You know, green light, red light, you know, making the guardians.
And it makes me feel better about me.
They go green light and go.
Yeah.
People where they go.
So that's the analogy of prayer. Also, any of the other prayers, the blessing after meals, or whatever blessings you say that require intention. And also, of course, you don't even have to mention the intention of doing mitzvahs for the right reason. Also with regards to Torah study. Everybody is supposed to study Torah. How much Torah are you supposed to study? How much Torah are you supposed to study? The Alter Rebbe says, and before in Tanya, makes it very clear. You know how much Torah you're supposed to study? More than you want to.
More than you want to?
Yes, because if you're only studying what you want to, you don't know yet if you're serving God. Maybe you're just enjoying yourself. If you want to serve God, you have to do more than you're comfortable with. You got to push yourself. You got to get out of your comfort zone. All the
So you
classic
can
modern
just, like,
expressions that work.
choose the specific things that you don't really like. Like, for example, I like the rules of Shabbat, so I'm gonna learn Shabbat. So I'm gonna choose something else.
Yeah. maybe.
Isn't it the opposite? Those things you like, the more that's where your focus should be.
Yes, and then you should also do more than you like.
Yeah, because that's how you grow. But
That not just that's how you grow. That's how you serve Him.
why the difference? I mean, when we say serving Him, that's taking me out of the game,
Right?
right? why do we need to take me out of the game? Why can't I just do it out of love because I enjoy it as much as possible? I want to learn till tomorrow. Why not? Like,
Because then you don't know if you do it for you or for them.
Because
let's say I do it
you
for
look
me.
around, if you look around, you can find people who love the learning so much that they continue to learn and they live their whole lives because they love the study
Mhm.
and they forget about God completely. You ever meet anybody like that?
חיי עילויים של שתי חדרים.
לא יודע. מה זה?
חיי עילויים של
Or
חדרים.
or they see themselves as
כאלה.
godly, goodly, because they keep
And,
studying.
and it has nothing to do with God. It's they're in love. They're in love with the commandments and they're in love with the Torah, but they're not. They haven't yet met God.
How do you find the right?
So again, no judgment, but you got to be able to push yourself outside of your comfort zone. So the same with here with Torah study. You're supposed to study much more than you're comfortable with. You're supposed to push yourself. Are you pushing yourself? I can study a couple hours a week. Come on. And then you're going to criticize that guy for not struggling with his temptations? That's not fair. Somebody who studies a little bit more than what comes naturally, that is a little bit of a struggle. That has no comparison in with a battle with an evil inclination that's a passionate, raging flame. The Mikra Rasha Gomor, still called a sinner. If you don't overcome the evil inclination, if you can't win over, beat down your animal soul because of your fear of God. You're going to say, well, look, my failings are in not doing more than I should be, not doing as much as I should. At least I'm not violating, I'm not doing something I shouldn't be doing. Sounds like that would be a little bit of that guy is doing horrible things. I'm not doing horrible things. I'm just not studying Torah enough. It's not really the same thing, right? Dr. says that's not true, because what's the difference if it's refraining from evil or doing good? The fact is, you're not putting in the effort to serve God properly. Now, why is there no difference between refraining from the positive mitzvahs or the negative mitzvahs, the commandments versus the prohibitions? Because hakel hi mitzvahs hamelach hakodesh yachad u'miyuchad baruch hu. It's all the commandment of. They're all the commandments of hamelach hakodesh yachad u'miyuchad baruch hu. The King, the Holy One, the one who is absolutely one. Blessed be He. Why couldn't he just say they're all the commandments of God? What's with all the? Why did he suddenly get poetic on us? We'll get back to that in a second. V'chein b'shar mitzvahs. The same is true with any other mitzvah. Especially when it comes to monetary things, like, for example, giving charity. Yeah, I give charity a little bit, as much as I'm comfortable giving. And then you're going to criticize that guy for not overcoming his temptations. You can't give more than your $18 or whatever. Poor man is hungry. You give him half your sandwich. Why don't you give him the whole sandwich? Well, I need something also. So you're not really willing to struggle with your temptations. You're just... See, anytime you see somebody else failing, you're supposed to say, what about me? Am I succeeding? Not am I failing in the same way. Not am I failing to the same extent, but am I failing in the same way, in the sense that he has his struggles, I have my struggles. Regardless of what they are, am I overcoming my struggles or not? Now let's back up to these words here for a second, just to show you how meticulous and wonderful Tanya is, how he words everything.
Amen.
He's trying to tell us that there's no difference between doing good versus refraining from evil, fulfilling the positive instructions of Torah versus versus not transgressing the prohibitions of Torah. So listen to what he says here. Very, very interesting. He gives us three descriptions of God. He says they're all the mitzvahs of God, but with three descriptors. The king, the holy king, the one and only, the one who is absolutely one with everything. There are, imagine a kingdom where you have the king, you have all the ministers, and you have the populace, and the government, the whatever you call it, the Senate, the ministers pass laws to make the country run the way they want it to make the country run well. If you violate one of the government laws, you get punished. You get prison time or whatever. You get caned in the city square, whatever the punishment is. But the punishment will be relative to the severity of the crime. How do you judge the severity of the crime? Well, it's usually because there's a victim. You look at the damage to the victim, or you look at the damage to society, or whatever it is. The laws have their utilitarian purpose, what the law is meant to accomplish, and depending on which law you violated, that's the culpability that you have. That's with regard to the laws that are passed by the government, by the ministers, the Senate, whatever you call it. What about an edict from the king? If you violate an edict from the king, it's treason and you get executed. But what if it was just a minor transgression? He said, stand over there, and you stood over here. The answer is, that's treason. So in every mitzvah, there are two components. There is the mitzvah as it is relative to the world, relative to creation, and then there's the mitzvah as it is relative to the commander, to the king. If you think of God in this context as the king, then what do you mean it's not as bad as transgressing a negative mitzvah? This is an edict of the king. There is no better or worse, or more bad or less bad. That's only with regards to how the rule applies to creation. But we're not talking about creation now. Now we're talking about God who gave us the mitzvah. So you want to say that violating one of the negative mitzvahs is worse than failing to perform one of the positive mitzvahs? That's true with regard to creation. But with regard to transgressing God's law, there's no difference. Like I like to use the example of, if you're talking about a real relationship, like in a marriage, if you know that that whatever X, Y, or Z is important to your spouse, and you ignore it, does it matter which sin we're talking about? How egregious the transgression is, or is the fact that you ignored your spouse's desire? You have both components, right? Of course, it wasn't so terrible. I forgot to put the cap back on the toothpaste tube. I mean, it's not the end of the world. On the other hand, it's something that she asked me to do 17 times. Why is it so difficult for me to do what's important to her? So,
ADHD.
right. ADHD, you know what that stands for?
The one with the donuts.
Yeah.
Attention deficit, hey donuts, right. So the first point is that it's a commandment of the king. Mitzvahs hamelech. If it's a commandment of the king, then there's no such thing as failing to observe a positive mitzvah is not as bad as transgressing it. No such thing. It's a commandment of the king. That's first of all. To kind of reaffirm that, or to bolster that idea, he says, HaKodesh, the Holy One. What does holy mean?
Separate.
Holy means separate, set apart. So again, you're talking about better or worse with regards to creation. God is not tethered to creation. God is holy and separate from creation. So again, don't get confused. Don't get confused between creation, where there is a difference between greater transgressions or lesser transgressions, with holy and separate, where there's no difference. It's what you were told to do. And then lastly, Yochad u'Meyuchad Baruch Hu, he's absolutely one. In absolute oneness, you can't separate different parts and different components. God is absolutely one, so his desire is that you follow the laws, the mitzvahs of the Torah. He wants you to follow the Torah. Well, which part is more important? Which part? God is absolute oneness. There are no parts. And if you're talking about Torah as God's desire, this is what is important. This is God's intellect and God's will. Then there's no components. There are no parts. It's all one thing. So again, you can't separate. So by saying Melech HaKodesh Yochad u'Meyuchad Baruch Hu, he's bolstering his argument that there's no difference between violating a prohibition or fulfilling the positive mitzvahs. Interesting how the wording of Tanya is that careful and that layered, deep.
He said that it's to them about 3 weeks to decide if to add and or not.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. Correct. Even when it comes to those transgressions that are in the category of refrain from evil, in other words, the prohibitions, every person with a little bit of intellect can find in themselves. Until now, he said, when it comes to, you can't consider yourself to be so much better than that guy, because that guy is violating mitzvahs all the time, but you're also failing to do mitzvahs properly. Positive commandment versus negative commandment. Now he's saying, let's be honest, even when it comes to refraining from the negative commandments, even when it comes to refraining from the prohibitions, you're failing a little bit in that category too. Everybody, he says, listen to how he says this. Everyone who has a basic intellect in their mind, can look in their own soul and see that they're not completely succeeding at refraining from evil. In those areas that require the kind of really, really difficult struggle that we described before. You think to yourself, well, I'm a good guy. I'm basically a good person. I'm a godly person. I serve God. I'm orthodox. I'm doing the right thing. What do you mean I struggle? What do I struggle with? I don't eat ham sandwiches. I don't steal. I don't cheat on my taxes. I don't run red lights. What am I struggling with?
If you're not cheat on your taxes, it's a sin.
But
So he says, or even less than that kind of struggle. For example, Kagoyim, this is going to hurt because we're all guilty. Kagoyim, for example, to stop in the middle of an unnecessary but wonderfully pleasant conversation. You're just wasting time. You're just having a casual conversation. Stop it. Isn't there something important you could be doing now? Ouch. I'm sorry. Oi. Maybe it's not just a casual conversation. Oi. Sipur bignus chaveiroi. Maybe you're saying something negative about somebody else. Guilty as charged. Even if it's just a very minor, insignificant flaw in the other person. Afshu emes. And not only is it minor, it's even true. I'm not making it up. It's true. Even just to clear your own name, because you're being accused of something, so you just guilty. There's a story in the Talmud, Kanoida, it says in the Talmud, Rabbi Shimon said to his father, Rabbeinu HaKadosh, Loi ana katve ela Yehuda chayta katve. The story is in the Talmud that there was a ketubah that was written, I think, had a mistake in it. And it was brought to Rabbeinu HaKadosh, the author of the Mishnah, and he said, "Whoa, Rab Shimon, my son, how do you make a mistake like this?" And Rabbi Shimon said, no, I didn't write that. That was Yehuda Chaita wrote that. And what did his father say to him? Amar Lei, his father said to him, Kol Chama Lashon Hara, stop with this slander. Stop with this Lashon Hara, evil talk. Now, if we're being held to that standard, maybe I am the Kal Shebekalim. All of a sudden, I feel just like that guy. Ayin Sham B'Gemara, Reish Pei Perek Yud Baba Basra, look in Baba Basra, you'll see. Ukahai Gavna, and like that, Kama Mili Deshchicha Tuva, things that are very common. Very, very common that we find ourselves saying something that we really didn't need to say. It wasn't a nice thing. We really didn't need to. We could have solved the problem without saying that, whatever it was. And especially when it comes to remember, we talked about this back in the beginning of Tanya, that there's a mitzvah to sanctify yourself by refraining from that which is permissible. So evil talk, speaking badly of others, you're not allowed. Sometimes you slip up. But there's another one. You're supposed to refrain from that which is not forbidden, but it's only for your own pleasure, even though it's permissible. You're supposed to train yourself to refrain from that because it isn't in the service of God. How am I doing on that account? As it says clearly in the Torah, Kedoshim Tiyu, you should be holy, Viskadishtem, and you will be sanctified. And also the rabbinic commandments, which in a certain sense are even more stringent than the biblical ones. The reason I do them, the reason I violate in this way is because these are all examples of sins that people just don't take seriously. I don't take them seriously because I don't understand the severity of it. If I understood the severity of it, I would take it more seriously. But I don't understand the severity of it. We all don't understand the severity of it, and therefore we take it lightly. We trample on these mitzvahs because it's not a big deal. That's not really a problem. Or I violate and become v'gam nasu keheter machmas sha'avar v'shana v'chulu. Or maybe I transgress it because I've done it so many times, I've just gotten used to it. I don't even think about it anymore. Let me back up another interesting thing here with the precise language in the Tanya. He says, when it comes to refraining from evil, he says, it's possible every one of us with a little bit of intellect can find in ourselves that we don't really refrain from evil completely, right? Look at the language that he uses in the Hebrew for completely. You don't refrain from evil completely. Bakoil in all matters, mikol from all matters, and koil, all matters. Bakol, mikol, kol, which is not a grammatically correct sentence at all. But it's a quote from the text, the liturgy of the grace after meals, our Birkat Hamazon. And it's a reference to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. When talking about their blessings from God, Abraham uses the expression bakol. Hashem says God blessed Avram with everything, bakol. With Yitzchak it says mikol, and with Yaakov it says kol. And with a little Kabbalistic explanation, each one of those actually applies to the particular one of the three forefathers in their service of God and how they served God in their unique way. Their unique ways were, Avraham was uniquely chesed, kindness. Yitzchak was uniquely discipline, gevura, severity. And Yaakov was distinctly, uniquely Tiferes, which is the perfect balance, the harmony between kindness and severity, which is also known in Kabbalah terms as the attribute of truth.
These were their stronger attributes.
Midot,
Okay.
stronger.
Like, can I like the
It's like we're doing.
Abraham was Goa for Yitzchak, for Abraham was Chesed.
Yeah.
And
So
this is how they serve God. Isn't it against what we just
no, it's not how they serve God. It's how they naturally serve God. But they also have to serve God in all the other ways. Not like, for example, the famous story of the binding of Isaac, the Akedah. Avraham is asked to sacrifice, to kill his son,
It's against this Chesed.
which is not just against, it was the polar opposite. And that's why only after the 10th test,
But it worked with Yitzchak Voa.
1 second, after the 10th test, which was killing his son Yitzchak, God says, now I know that Avram is a God-fearing man. Why doesn't it say, now I know that Yitzchak is a God-fearing man? He knew what happened. He knew what was going on. He was letting himself be killed.
Because he wasn't controlling the situation and he wasn't against
He was
his-
controlling the situation. He
Eh,
was 35 years old. His father was an
Yeah.
old man. He was controlling the situation. His father is 135 and he's 35. Who was controlling the situation? No, the point is that, listen to the language. In the Torah it says, Ataya dati, after Avram succeeds and passes the test of being willing to sacrifice his son, it says, Ataya dati, now I know, ki yirei Elokimata, that you fear God. Yirah is in the category of Gevurah. Fear is in the category of Yitzchak's nature. So it's only after the 10th test, all 9 tests prove that Avraham loved God. But to prove that he also feared God, in other words, that he could serve God in a different way than what comes to him naturally, so that's what we're saying here. Avraham has a specific natural mode of service of God. Yitzchak has a particular service of God, which is, Avram is kindness, friendliness, camaraderie, whatever. Yitzchak is severity, judgment, discipline, and Yaakov is truth. The right amount of this, you come to the truth, right? Now listen to this. Keep this in mind. Avraham, bakol mikol kol. He's saying you have to serve God completely not only in every mitzvah, but with every mode of service. And then he gives an example. For example, you're in the middle of a really nice, pleasant conversation, or criticizing somebody else, or if you're saying something that's actually true about the other person. Nice, pleasant conversation, that's 1. Criticizing another, that's 2. True statements about another, that's 3. What do you have there? You have Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. You have the 3 modes of service. 1 is kindness, right? The friendly conversation. You're in the middle of a pleasant conversation, but it's not the right conversation, so stop it. The second is the Yitzchak attribute. You're in the middle of criticizing somebody, but you're not criticizing properly. This is not what you're meant to be doing now. Stop it. Or you're misusing truth. Well, it's true, so why shouldn't I say it? That's not what truth is for. You have to succeed in serving God properly in all of those modes of service. Serve God properly in your kindness, serve God properly with your discipline, and serve God properly with truth. I mean, the precision with which the Alter Rebbe wrote Tanya is amazing. The layers and layers and layers, which is why you can learn Tanya. Like I mentioned, when we had the 19th of Kislev gathering, that we do Tanya in an annual cycle. You can study Tanya over and over and over again for 60, 70, 80 years, and you will always learn something new, because that's the nature of the book. Anyway, so far what we have is the Alter Rebbe explained. If you notice, it feels a little bit like a bait and switch if you stop here, because the Alter Rebbe said the way to overcome the blocked heart, the second way to overcome the blocked heart, which is in chapter 30, is to be humble before all people. In other words, to believe that you're lower than all other people. So far, all he gave us was why we can't consider ourselves better than anybody. He hasn't yet told us why I'm actually lower than the other person. That's the last page of the chapter, which we'll get to next week, God willing. Shavua Tov.
What?